Hello, and welcome to Building Hadoop Clusters. This is Section 2, Setup, Network, and Security Settings. In the previous section, we covered multiple topics. We gave an introduction to the Amazon Cloud, and we talked about AWS and using it for deploying EC2 instances, as well as how to deploy the right Linux Amazon machine image. We also set up elastic IP addresses and showed you how to start and terminate instances. In this section, section number 2, we will cover network and security settings. Specifically in this video, we're going to take an overview of security and network connectivity to the Amazon Cloud. This includes creating security groups to help identify the correct inbound and outbound IP addresses and ports. We will also assign EC2 instances to security groups so they take on these network settings. Finally, we will show you how to use private keys in a Windows client environment to connect to your instances. There are two methods for connecting to each of the Amazon instances. The first method is using the Amazon web client that you can access through the EC2 dashboard. This is known as a thin client because you do not have to download any software. The other method for connecting to your instances is you can download a client and run it off your computer. This method is known as a thick client. In this video series, we will be downloading a free tool called PuTTY, which uses the SSH protocol to connect to instances in the Amazon Cloud. The second goal for this video is around security groups. Security groups implement the concept of Amazon firewall settings. For your instances, you're going to define a security group. You can assign that instance to a security group and it will define the firewall settings allowing IP addresses that can connect to the instances and through what ports. The format's going to be in the form of IP address /number, and the X's represent the IP address that are the acceptable IP addresses in the security group, as well as the Y's that signify the open ports for communication. For Hadoop services in your cluster, we are going to be using multiple jobs or processes that are running on different ports in the cluster, and so we have to account for those. If you decide to go with the security setting that locks down the environment Amazon Cloud, then we will have to account for these different IP addresses and ports that will be used in Hadoop. We will show you how to do that now as an example. However, setting up a complete security group for Hadoop is outside of the scope of this course. We will show you how to make some simple security group settings that all ports are open, but only for a defined set of IP addresses, namely your client and the Hadoop nodes in the cluster. If you navigate your web browser to Hortonworks website, you can look at the documentation for the Hadoop distribution below the Hortonworks stated platform. We showed you this in Section 1, Video 1. We click here on HDP, which takes us to the HDP home site, or then we can click on Documentation. Click on Documentation and Installation Manual, and you will be able to go down to Deploying, Configuring, and Upgrading Ambari, which you see here. Ambari is basically the management software for Hadoop. Now, if we expand under this tab, you can see an area called Configuring Ports. In that section, we will see all the different services that are within Hadoop, and for example, if you click HDFS ports, for the Hadoop distributed file system, you'll get an idea of all the ports that you'll need to have access through if you decide to lock down your cluster. Keep in mind, if you define to secure ports in Amazon security groups, make sure you account for TCP and UDP protocols. Now that you've seen all of the ports required to start your Hadoop cluster, we will use this list as an example in the next section to create a security group so that you know how to only use the ports needed for Hadoop. Now go to the Amazon website, AWS Management Console, and log in. Go ahead to the EC2 dashboard and you'll see here is where you can define your security groups. See the section called Security Groups, and if you go ahead and click that, you can see where you can actually define your security group settings or existing setting. We will talk about how to use the security groups in the next section. So to summarize, in this section we have learned about the Amazon connection methods for the AWS instances, and we also talked about security groups and what ports you need to define for a Hadoop cluster. Coming up in the next section, we'll be identifying and allocating security groups and giving an example of how to set them up. We will then assign the security groups to the instances.